Thank you. Welcome to the nation's baffling capital. I guess it can now be told it is indeed the case that if you seek a part on primetime American television, the surest way is the study of medieval Jewish history. I want to speak not for very long and in very broad strokes and make a few crude generalizations to provoke some discussion between us. My subject will be basically on the occasion of our 350th, a cheshbon nefesh, a collective reckoning with ourselves of what we have and have not accomplished as a community. As again, this is a very large and grossly general subject, but we have 20 minutes. All of us were raised on a particular axiom of Jewish identity, which is that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. That essentially we are all alike like each other in some deep way. So that a Jew in 18th century Lublin had more in common with a Jew in 18th century Casablanca than he or she did with a non-Jew in 18th century Lublin. That there was something essentially fundamentally alike. And this axiom was the natural foundation for our feeling of solidarity with all our brothers and sisters everywhere. The idea that, as the United Jewish Appeal used to say, maybe it still does, that we are one, was a proposition that was not only morally beautiful, but also a kind of necessary fiction to preserve this solidarity. I say it's a necessary fiction because when a historian comes to study the Jewish people, it turns out that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew is really not good enough. That there are many ways in which we have differed from each other, important ways, significant ways. So much so that all of the great Jewish communities can even, in the history of the diaspora, can even be said to have had their own spiritual profiles, if you will, their own identities, the ways in which they differed and distinguished themselves and contributed differently from other great Jewish communities. Many, many years ago when my colleagues, my fellow students and I were at Widener Library and failing to understand a very obscure 12th century Spanish Jewish text, we decided to change the subject. And we invented a field so as to refresh ourselves that we called Comparative Diasporology. Now, the idea of comparative diaspora sounds funny, but actually we were half serious. The idea would be how really can we characterize the particular communities in their essences? We did this for two reasons. We did this first as an instrument, as a way into historical understanding. It became clear that the Jewish culture of Sfarad was not like the Jewish culture of Ashkenaz. It became clear that within Ashkenaz, the Jewish culture of Österreich was not like the Jewish culture of the Rhineland in many significant ways, and so on and so forth. And so we got very interested in characterizing the internal cultures within this universal Jewish culture that we all talk about. Some of the profiles were quite obvious. We all know about the Golden Age in Spain, where there were philosophers and poets and courtiers and warriors and wine songs and gay love songs. And we know that Ashkenaz, there were almost no philosophers. There were certainly no warriors or courtiers. To the best of our knowledge, there were no straight love songs. There was simply an amazing amount of profound law of halacha and liturgy and a certain kind of pietistic mysticism. And these were two distinct Jewish cultures with distinctly different accomplishments and distinctly different tendencies. The other reason we liked the idea of comparative diasporology so much is that it was an instrument also for historical reckoning, for the cheshbon that I'm talking about, because it didn't take very long before we came to the question, well, what does the American Jewish community look like to the comparative diasporologist? What are our accomplishments? What have we built? What have we not built? Where have we been strong? Where have we been weak? And it became pretty clear, it didn't take long in the conversation for us to arrive at a very broad, but I think still very valid conclusion to which we all subscribed, which is that the accomplishments of the American Jewish community have been overwhelmingly institutional, communal, social, political, economic, and organizational, and that nothing that we have done in the realm of the spirit, in the realm of culture, in the realm of literature, remotely attains to the level that we have accomplished in the former field. Now, this was not altogether bad news. One of the first things one learns in medieval Jewish history is that the Jews have always had a genius for institution building, not only as a practical matter because we had ourselves to protect and we could rely only on ourselves insofar as we could rely on ourselves to protect ourselves, but also because we believe in the community as a moral agent, and we believe in institutions as not just a practical necessity, but a moral glory of some kind. And if you look at American Jewish institutions and you go back and leaf through, I don't know, Louis Finkelstein on Jewish self-government in the Middle Ages, or Goetein's decoding of some Cairo Geniza scraps having to do with, say, philanthropic fundraising and so on, one is tickled and quite moved to see that we've been doing this well for a very long time. This is a field that we truly have mastered. And to a significant extent, it does account for our survival as a people and for the survival of our religion as well, On the other hand, it was also bad news. There was something, in comparison with other diaspora communities, something thin, we thought, or at least I still think, about the culture of American Jewry and about the religion, about the Judaism of American Jewry. And we can, in question and answers, we can get into more details about why and how. And again, I'm not entirely pessimistic, though I'm by no means an optimist about the future of Judaism and Jewish culture in this country. I do not believe it will disappear. I believe, though, that it may be thinned out to an almost unrecognizable degree. I think that more of the Jewish tradition is slipping through our fingers in this place in a time of peace and prosperity and security than ever slipped through the fingers of our ancestors anywhere, even in times of persecution and war. I want to offer three explanations. There are many explanations, I'm sure, but if we're going to begin this 350th year or continue and carry on in the 350th year in a spirit of cheshbon hanefesh, in a spirit of self-reckoning, I want to just propose three reasons that can be given for this conclusion that us amateur, well, we weren't amateur comparative diasporologists, we were the only ones in the world at the time. So, the first one is a historical or sociological explanation, and it has to do with the life cycle of an immigrant community. We are, after all, an immigrant community. And, sociologists, I don't know if they still do, but when I studied sociology many years ago in the late 19th century, sociologists used to regard generations as a span of 30 years. I don't know if they still do, but in any case, let's say that that's the case. If you look at the creation of the great American Jewish community, and I don't mean the people who came from Recife to New Amsterdam, where in 1654, I mean 1880 and on. We'll just start. What you find is this. From the first generation that arrived, meaning the immigrants themselves, let's call that 1880 to 1910, but this is very, very... It was not realistic to expect the creation of an indigenous American Judaism because they brought the Judaism of the famous old country with them. And so they should. And like all immigrants, like the immigrants from Muslim societies that are now driving some people crazy in this country, they became very, very defensive about the attenuation and the erosion and the loss of this tradition, and did whatever they could to demonstrate their fidelity to this tradition and to hang on to it. So these people were only going to live by the Jewishness and the Judaism that they carried with them. Then you have, let's call it 1910 to 1930, the children. And again, I'm speaking very coarse generalizations here. The children became almost a parody of what was known in Jewish literature as the all-right-niks. The children were the classical children of immigrants. You can see it also, by the way, in the children of contemporary Muslim immigrants to the United States. They lost their languages. They shaved their beards. They were obsessed with America. They wanted to be American. They kindled to the American promise. Their parents looked like aliens to them in many ways. Hearts were broken, shivas were sat, families were disrupted. We all know the novels and the films and even the personal reminiscences of people who remember these tragedies, or if you will, in some cases, these tragic comedies. But from the children, from the second generation, again, it was not realistic to expect the establishment of an indigenous American Judaism, of an American Jewish identity that would be American and not Galiciana or Litvak or Russian or Chernowitzer or wherever you want.